Samsung, proud sponsor of TechBusters.
In studio with us is Emeka Okafor, who is one of the coolest looking people you'll ever find, but which is totally appropriate. I mean, there's no other way to say this. He works for Maker Faire Africa, and it is just the coolest thing you've ever seen. There are brilliant inventions, both high-tech and low-tech, and Emeka, I mean, it's just so goddamn cool. Tell us why.
Well, you know, the maker movement as it stands is in many ways the defining movement of our time. It's a movement that speaks to how do we redefine creativity? How do we foster entrepreneurship? How do we look at education very differently? Yes, more or less people could say the maker movement was defined in the United States, but one thing I'll say to people is that makers have always existed across Africa.
Yeah, exactly.
So what we're doing is not necessarily cutting and pasting what people may define the maker movement as in the United States, but we're contemporizing it. We're adapting it to suit what we think the needs and aims and objectives of such a movement, what such a movement should be in this part of the world. So to your earlier point, you will see at our fair everything from people who are hacking together their own 3D printers and robots, right down to people doing more lo-fi stuff. So we see it as a continuum of creativity where you don't have to be, quote unquote, the educated inventor or the credentialed scientist to seek your inner creativity. We see the maker movement as something that unifies technology as a whole.
And produces some amazing products. I mean, was it last year or the year before, those, I think they were schoolgirls, I forget, from Kenya or Nigeria, who made a generator that worked on urine?
Yes, exactly. You know, it was interesting because there were many Lagosians who were surprised to realize that in the city that they had lived, there were young people like that who were incredibly ingenious in what they were doing. And we seek to uncover that on a continent-wide basis and essentially say to people that the future is something that might not necessarily come out from a big university lab. Yeah. It could just as much come out from your neighbor's kitchen.
It's that word ingenuity, isn't it? Because my theory of what innovation is problem solving. And people solve real problems in Africa because we have real problems. And the solutions are amazingly and unexpected, like schoolgirls. But there are other things. You know, Eric Hersman, who's coming down, is using this as an excuse to drive down the continent on his bike. Has shown us some great examples of ways of threshers that, you know, separate the wheat from the chaff. You know, those kind of, you'd think, very low-tech solutions, but they're quite brilliant.
Yes, they are quite brilliant. And, you know, people sometimes look at this part of the world and think about the problems. And there are those who might argue, well, the problem solving needs to come from elsewhere. Our argument is that the problem solving needs to come from around us. If we look closely enough, we will see those problem solvers. And that's partly why we're here to showcase it and say it's around us. You just need to uncover it.
Exactly. There's a great South African phrase called local is lekker, which means local is great.
Yes.
You know, local's really good. So I'm pleased to see that. What are some of the highlights? The show's coming up in a couple of days.
Yes, it's the show is taking place at Saibono here in Johannesburg. We're going to be jam-packed with not just inventors and makers and tinkerers, but also with workshops, with people where you can learn and sort of work with the community that is emerging and growing in Johannesburg as we speak.
Great. So it's this Saturday and Sunday at the Saibono.
Actually, it's Friday and Saturday.
Friday and Saturday at the Saibono
Yes.
Expo in Newtown.